Hello everyone. Today we have with us Dr. Sanjay Baru for the second interview of ISPP Policy Review interview series. Before proceeding further, let me give a brief introduction about him. He has been an editor of India's major financial newspapers, The Economic Times, Financial Express, and Business Standard. He was media advisor to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and he is the author of India's Power Alight and insightful work for the young minds. Today, he has joined with us to share his insights on upcoming elections in the states. Thank you, Dr. Baru, for joining.
Good morning. Thank you.
So, Dr. Baru, starting with one of the biggest challenges facing the country, which is unemployment. So, my first question to you, in the upcoming state elections, how important is the issue of rising unemployment for the youth as well as the political parties?
Well, for the youth, it is the most important issue because the fact is that the economic slowdown, which has been made worse by the pandemic and the lockdown, has had a negative impact on employment, on overall economic growth. And therefore, for young people who are coming into the job market, this is the most important issue. But is it such an important issue in the elections? Well, that depends on where you are in the political spectrum. Because as far as the government is concerned, or sorry, the BJP is concerned, which is in government in Delhi and in UP and in Goa, the focus of the campaign has been on non-economic issues. While in the case of the opposition political parties, they are seeking to focus on economic issues. So, who regards the economic situation as more important, I guess, depends on the political position one adopts.
Agreed, Dr. Baru. So my second question is, when one looks at the manifestos of political parties, so they are very bold about the welfare policies that they are offering, like 300 free electricity units. But when it comes to giving the models for development, it is just in the form of opinion. So why does political parties fail to come up with a complete plan of action?
The problem is that manifestos have not always been so important in election campaigns. But manifestos become important once a political party comes to power. And so we have seen again and again how the manifesto is often cited in defense of policies that are adopted, because people do not pay enough attention during a campaign to the manifesto. For example, when Article 370 was revoked in Jammu and Kashmir in August 2019, there was a lot of protest. But then the BJP said, look, it's part of our manifesto. And we got re-elected. So we have every right to do this. And they were, of course, right. But nobody pays attention to the elements of a manifesto during the campaign. I mean, you look at the campaign that is now going on, it's essentially on non-economic issues. In Uttar Pradesh, which is the biggest state, the focus of the BJP has been on law and order and on communal issues, while the focus of the opposition has also been on communal issues in the sense of criticizing the BJP. Though there is a little attempt at trying to bring economics into the main debate. I mean, I think even someone like Akhilesh Yadav took a little while to actually focus on the economy. But the economy is the most important issue. Uttar Pradesh particularly has had one of the lowest rates of growth in the recent past.
Talking about Uttar Pradesh, Dr. Baru, SP and Congress departed after their debacle in UP elections in 2017. Will this departure help the political parties in the upcoming elections?
Sorry, I didn't get that question. What happened to the Congress?
Two parties, SP and Congress, they departed after their debacle in the last elections. And now they are going solo in these elections. Will this help the parties in getting their vote bank?
Well, I have not understood the strategy of the Congress party. I think the Congress party is fighting two very different battles. On the one hand, it is an internal battle for the dominance of Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi within the party. So there's an inner party struggle going on. I mean, you can see whether it's in the Punjab or in UP, there is as much of an inner party struggle going on as there is a political contest with the opposition. So the Congress strategy has been, in my view, a very complex strategy, because partly doing well in these elections will determine the future of Rahul Gandhi, for his future within his own party. But also doing well in this election is necessary for the Congress to prove to everybody else that it is the dominant opposition party, because there is another battle happening, which we can see much more, obviously in Punjab and Goa, which is who is the face of the opposition? Is it the Congress? Is it Rahul Gandhi or Priyanka? Is it Mamata Banerjee? Is it Arvind Kejriwal? Now even someone like Chandrasekhar Rao in Telangana suddenly popping up. So everybody in the opposition is also using these elections to show their own importance. So there are multiple kind of contests going on in these elections.
Like you rightly mentioned, the political landscape is quite volatile. And in these elections, a lot of noted political leaders have changed sides within days. So what do you make of these for the India's electoral democracy?
Well, I think what I make of this for India's electoral democracy is that they're all making a mockery of democracy. I mean, it's no longer important what your ideology is. It's no longer important. That is why, when you asked about manifestos, I said, I don't know how important these manifestos are. So you can be with the BJP today and be called communal. You can be with Samajwadi Party tomorrow and become secular. You can come back to the BJP day after tomorrow and again become called communal. I mean, ideology is like changing your clothes every day, right? You remain the same person, your clothes are different. So every day you have a new ideology. And this is what is happening. I mean, the only political party that so far has not been contaminated by outsiders are the communists. They have not yet got into this game of admitting anyone and everyone. But the BJP used to be like that. It used to be a kind of an ideological party. But it no longer is. I mean, you have Jyotiraditya Scindia, you have RPN Singh, you have Jitin Prasada, all ministers in the Manmohan Singh government. Now members of the Modi, one of them is a member of the government, the others are members of the BJP. So even the BJP is now admitting whoever. So, when this phenomenon of floor crossing happened in the 1980s, we had this phrase called Ayaram Gayaram, because there were these two MPs, both of whom had Ram in their name, switching parties. Now everybody is an Ayaram Gayaram in every political party.
It's an interesting, I won't say that interesting, but surely a challenging task for the Indian electoral democracy. And going forward, on the similar note, Dr. Bari, you mentioned about the protests in your previous answers. So there was a protest about farm laws. The 3 farm laws were repealed back in November 2021. How relevant do you think are these issues in the upcoming elections in Punjab and Uttar Pradesh?
Certainly in Punjab, but also in Western Uttar Pradesh. I don't think it's such a big issue in the rest of the state, but certainly I'm told in Western Uttar Pradesh. There are several aspects to the farmers' agitation. First and foremost, I think there's a serious alienation of the peasantry in the Punjab. And a lot of that is spilled over into Western Uttar Pradesh. Second, there's a caste factor in the case of the Jat community in both Punjab and Western Uttar Pradesh feeling alienated. And of course, third, there's a larger crisis in the Punjab of unemployment, etc. Many people who have traveled across Punjab have written very extensively about the implosion of the Punjab economy and the lack of opportunities. So multiple problems, I think, have manifested themselves in this farmers' agitation. I think there were many grievances coming together. There were economic grievances, there were larger issues of livelihood, there were issues about farmers' income, and there were caste-based issues. And that has now become a central issue. I think in the Punjab, the BJP is expected to do very, very poorly because it has just not been able to make an impact. Its handling of the whole issue has been terrible. In Western UP too, it appears that the BJP is not on a very strong wicket. So while the agitation began as a farmers' agitation, I think the fact that it went on for so long, it kind of drew in several grievances. And those grievances have now come to define the electoral outcome both in Punjab and in Uttar Pradesh, Western Uttar Pradesh.
And borrowing from this, Dr. Baru, the farmers form a strong pressure group, and yet they choose to remain neutral in their political stance. And they have done this in their previous historic moments in the 1980s. What do you think is the rationale behind their decision in this case?
Well, I don't think this time they have been neutral. I mean, the fact is that they've kept the agitation non-political, which I think was a very intelligent strategy so that the government could not simply dismiss the agitation as a political agitation. And it was because it was not just a political agitation. As I said, it began with economic grievances, but it drew in several other grievances, and therefore it eventually became political. But the fact is that the farmers this time in Punjab are openly anti-BJP. So in that sense, they are no longer non-political. They have taken a position that they will not vote for the BJP. And I think that is why the BJP is in such a bad position in the Punjab. But all such agitations, whether it's a student's agitation, whether it's a worker's agitation, whether it's a farmer's agitation, they all begin essentially with sectional interests or sectional grievances. It could either be inflation, it could be some trade union issue, it could be an issue that bothers students. But the way in which these agitations are handled on the one hand, and the way in which these grievances are addressed on the other, then defines whether they evolve into a political movement or remain a sectional movement. And I think we've seen this again and again. Not all students' agitations become political, but many students' agitations have become political. In the past, we've had the Assam, the Students' Union, major changes in Assam politics because of a movement that started as a students' movement. We've had in Gujarat in the 1970s and 80s. So in different parts of the country, students' agitations have become political. Similarly, farmers' agitations have become political. But at what stage of a sectional agitation becomes a political movement depends, I think, as I said, very much on how it is addressed and how the issues get articulated to the general public.
Coming to the entrance of the new political parties in the electoral democracy, AAP is batting big in both Punjab and Goa. So how do you think the political field changes with its entry? And what role the landed class plays in the politics of Punjab for AAP?
Well, in Punjab, I think the issue really is of a widespread grievance. I mean, it's a state in which there's a lot of unhappiness from whatever one I read of the politics of Punjab. And therefore, there are different ways in which this is being articulated. The Aam Aadmi Party is hoping to emerge as the single largest party, if not, in fact, as the ruling party in the Punjab, and they may well do that. It's not just about land and farmers. I think the issue really in the Punjab, from whatever I've read, is of a wider grievance of lack of opportunities, of rising drug addiction, of the people wanting to leave and go away to Canada or to UK or wherever. So there is it's a state in serious economic and social crisis. And the AAP has positioned itself as a party of reform. The Congress, which was in fact on the defensive under Amrinder Singh, because Amrinder Singh in many ways became a symbol of all that was wrong with the Punjab, has very cleverly replaced him with Mr. Channi, who seems to have emerged quite popular in a very short time. He has established himself. But the Congress has internal problems with Sidhu and Manish Tiwari. So as I said, the Congress is fighting two battles. It's fighting an internal battle for dominance. It's fighting an external battle for power. And so what happens in the Punjab will be interesting to see. I won't be surprised if it's a hung assembly in which the Aam Aadmi Party emerges as a single largest party. And if that happens, I won't be surprised if the Congress then extends kind of outside support and allows them to form a government. On the other hand, if the Congress emerges as a single largest party, then again, I will not be surprised if Aam Aadmi Party extends outside support, or even the Akalis extend outside support. So what happens in Punjab, I think, is really a function of numbers. In Goa, I think the fight is increasingly becoming a two-party fight between the Congress and the BJP. I think initially the Aam Aadmi Party and the Trinamool Congress tried to establish their base, but I don't think either of them have really succeeded. And as you can see, there is a coming together of the opposition. So it will be a direct fight between the Congress and the BJP. And the Congress may well again emerge as a single largest party, in which case if there are a few MLAs of the TMC or the Aam Aadmi Party, they might support it. So I think both in Punjab and Goa, we will probably see a non-BJP government of some form or another.
It was a great insight, Dr. Baru. So coming to our last question. So one of the social issues that has been in India for the last 7 decades is the women participation in the electoral democracy. In these elections also, the participation of women is less than 10% of those who are contesting the elections. Yet they have a strong vote base if we talk about gender politics. So then what refrains the political parties to give their tickets to the women?
Well, I mean, you ask any political party, and here every one of them is guilty, whether it's the BJP or the Congress or the regional political parties or the left parties. Every one of them is guilty of not giving enough number of tickets to women. And if you ask them, the simple answer every political party gives is what I call the winnability factor. We decide to give tickets depending on who we think can win in a constituency. And eventually it is men who dominate the local politics at the constituency level. And therefore men end up getting those tickets. Now, I mean, winnability is an issue, no doubt. But I think there is a larger issue of, male dominance or gender inequality in political parties, which cuts across political parties. But if you want to look at it in a positive way, then you can see that the number of women in parliament has gone up, number of women in assemblies has gone up. And this is becoming an issue. I mean, the woman's vote. See, in the past, the view was that people vote as a family, that women and men in a family vote together, that joint families take a decision or the community takes a decision. So it's not an individual vote. I think that era is over. We are now in an era in which within a family, the husband can vote for one party, the wife can vote for another party, children can vote for a third party. And I think that is becoming increasingly common. And therefore, there is an independent women's vote. It is no longer a caste vote or a regional vote, but there is also a gender vote emerging. And you can see political parties targeting that. I think Narendra Modi benefited in the past from being able to attract a lot of women's vote. But in UP, from what I gather, women are very alienated. They're very unhappy because of the way in which the COVID issue has been managed, the problem of unemployment, etc., etc. So it's possible, and that is why Priyanka Gandhi has given more tickets to women in the Congress platform in UP. So it remains to be seen to what extent gender plays a role in the UP elections.
Thank you, Dr. Baru. We hope the women get their due in the upcoming elections and India emerges as a prosperous democracy in coming decades. And thank you for your insights. It was a great I had a great time interviewing you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best to you.